Hello. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about something that I think many managers get this fundamentally wrong about how they manage people. So there's something called regression to the mean, and it's a statistical term, but in a nutshell, what it means is when there's a random sample, if you have an extreme outlier, you're more likely to be closer to the mean on the next one than further away. So basically, the further out you get, the more likely you are to go back towards the mean. Now, people aren't random. When people have variations in their performance, it's influenced by things, but they still have this general principle that there is a set level that they can perform at, and when they vary from that, they tend to go back to their established level. And changing that level, it's a long-term impact. So if you're a weightlifter, you generally have a max that you can lift, but if you keep lifting, your max goes up and up and up. So you might have a good day where you go in there and get a little bit more than the max that you normally work out at. And when I say max, it's not the extreme max, but your workout weight. You might have a good day where you feel like you want to put an extra few pounds on, and a bad day when you're having trouble with it and you want to take a few pounds off. But as a rule, you have a high baseline that you work out at. So those impacts in the workplace, when you have an impact like that, it might be that you're feeling a little sick. And, in the pandemic era, we probably shouldn't be at work anyway with that. But let's say you have a sore ankle or a sore foot or something like that, and you're not at your peak performance, and you start having some troubles doing your job as good as you can, or maybe you're just tired and, new baby, and it keeps you up late and you have some performance problems because you're tired, or you're just distracted by something. There's a big project going on and that's getting you a little bit out of sorts. But none of those things change your core abilities. So if you're tired, it doesn't mean like you suddenly got worse at your job. It just means you have this external factor that's affecting your job. And the reverse is also true. There are times when you go to work and just the stars all line up, and the people you've asked questions to all deliver things on time, and somebody gives good news, and you're working on procuring something, and the person you're talking to is in a great mood and they give you a better deal, and just everything all lines up, and suddenly you've got performance that exceeds what you normally do. So the example of this is when, the most common example you'll see is you'll have an average player on a football team, and they'll go out and have an extraordinary day. They'll get, twice as many yards as they normally get on average. And it's not like they just suddenly got better. It's just different factors all lined up and they did better. But you wouldn't gamble that they would have another day the next day at the high level. You would probably assume that they're going to come back down to the bottom, to the normal, unless they're starting to see a trend of some particular reason why they're changing. So with that as the baseline, is that people have a set performance level, and they'll sometimes go above it, sometimes go below it. But over short periods of time, they always tend to drift back towards towards the mean. That's called regression to the mean. So with that in mind, let's think about how that impacts managers. So if a manager sees somebody underperforming, they generally have an approach where they go up and either reprimand them, or, sometimes it's very positive coaching to say, get better and work on this factor. But the majority of poor managers will see this as an opportunity to reprimand an employee. And what happens? They give the reprimand, and the next day, or once this little external factor goes away, suddenly the person is doing well again. So you get this kind of situation. You get people make mistakes, they have a problem, something happens, they get yelled at. And then the next thing you know, you kind of look at this chart over here. Now this chart I made with random numbers. So the idea here is 100 is baseline performance, and I did the random numbers with a standard deviation of 10. So this is all random. And, obviously people aren't random, but with random numbers, let's say you're a manager and you come in and this person's operating here regularly, and they have 2 days in a row they've done really well. What does a manager do? I would say a not as savvy manager might do this. And this is a very typical response. Hey, you've done really good 2 days in a row. Great job. Keep it up. What happens? Randomness comes in, and the next day they're at 85 instead of 100. So now the manager in the back of their mind is starting to think, hey, if I give an attaboy and give a coach, people take it and they stop working as hard, or they feel like they've made it and they don't have as much incentive to keep doing well. So for whatever reason, people start seeing this. You go up, you get an attaboy, you drop. You go up, you get an attaboy, you drop. Attaboy up here, you drop. Attaboy here, you drop. It's randomness. And, the sawtooth patterns, you get a little bit of that where it goes up and down. But for the most part, you get a couple in a row, up, down. You have a general trend, and then it drops and changes. So this is random. This is how it looks with random. If you see any of these, there's certain characteristics you look for that in a run chart like this, that, if you have too many of these up and down in a row, it's not random data. But this is random. So what comes away from this to a manager is they don't see pats on the back as working to sustain good performance. But let's look at it the other way around. Let's look over here, and this person comes in, gets yelled at on this day. What happens? They do better the next day. And then it drops again. What's going to happen? They're going to get yelled at on this day. And then it goes up, have a couple good days, you get your reprimand or your attaboys, and then you drop again. You get yelled at, nothing happens. It's not like instant. Nobody believes it's just going to be an instant response, but they're going to know that if they go and talk to the employee at this time. When I say reprimand or say yelled at, it's varying degrees. It's not like a bullhorn situation, but we do have managers that come in and they're clearly irritated at the low performance, and they maybe give you a verbal warning, or they just, the demeanor tells you that they're giving a de facto reprimand, that they're saying you're not doing up to the standard, fix the problem. So what happens is, over time, managers start feeling like this works. And they start feeling like if there's poor performance and I reprimand somebody, it goes up. If there's good performance and I give them an attaboy, it goes down. And that's the lesson that people learn, even though it's not an overt lesson, that there's nobody teaching that, hey, reprimand people, but don't give them attaboys. But this is what people learn from experience. So this actually comes from when I first started hearing about this. This was, a decade ago I heard about this, but there was a Israeli Air Force did a study, and they were known to be pretty harsh on pilots during training. And they were finding this. They were finding that a pilot, if they made a mistake on an approach and they got yelled at, the worse they got yelled at, the better they did. And it had nothing to do with the yelling at the person. It had to do with the fact that they were regressing back to the mean. So they had a bad day, they get yelled at, and they do better the next day. And the converse is true also. If they have a really great approach and they get the pat on the back and they get a little gold star put by their name, they drop back down to the mean. Now, each person's mean is a little different. It's not like every person is the same. So you might have one person performing better over time than another person. But for each person, this is true. And if you actually did a study, a controlled study, and you had one group that when they did poorly, you sprinkled glitter on their feet and called it magic fairy dust, and the other group, you yelled at them, both of them would perform the same randomly. Or, if you take the statistics, they would both have the same impact from what you did in that moment. Now, there is a caveat to this, is when I talk about reprimand, I'm talking about a general, hey, you got to do better, pull your head out of your, and figure it out. And, you basically get told, do better. Now, in continuous improvement, you don't just tell people do better. You go through and you find out what caused the poor performance. So in this case, when I talk about what we have here, we are looking at, in continuous improvement, this day over here, we are at 112 or whatever this is, requires just the same amount of investigation as this one over here where you're at 87, because you thought you were going to be at 100 and you deviated from that. So we always want to understand what the deviation is. We want to understand why was there a change. So the good changes, we want to be able to replicate them. The bad changes, we want to be able to eliminate them. So the whole idea is we want to keep making changes that drive this average up. So you want to do something to collect the data and understand the reasons for the variation. So we have things like daily management or something similar to that, where you make a prediction. If you fall off the target, you have to check why. And then the real key here is reprimands and attaboys. In this case, we're talking about short term. We're talking about you go and tell somebody to do something today. Now, the flip side is if you have somebody that's doing poorly and you come up with a plan, you say, we want you to take these classes. We need you to figure out how to be on time to work. Why are you late? Well, let's help you get better childcare. So, if you have a issue like that, you go and look to HR and see if there's any kind of benefits or anything like that are available that can help people out. You might be able to get them to go to college if you have funding for that in your company. So there's a lot of things you can do to create a long-term performance plan. And instead of a reprimand driving you up to the mean, these changes are actually raising the mean. So you're not creating a change in the randomness. You're creating a new baseline for the average. So you can do that with long-term. And the same principles apply for if somebody's exceeding it. You say, why did you exceed this time? And then you find a long-term plan to make sure you lock in whatever the issue was, whatever the performance windfall was. So it could be that, all of your, normally you don't get your reports delivered to you on time. So you're always rushing at the end of the day. And today they all came in early. So you're able to get all of your, maybe you're in accounting and these are expense reports and you're always rushing to get them done at the last minute and people complain because they're late. But if they all get delivered on time and all whatever the things you need to do your job get there early, you can do better. So then you start to say, how do you replicate that and make sure that the situations drive good performance? So anyway, that's just quick little thoughts about how managers can take the things. And I'm actually should say one more thing. So the issue here, and I have this over here written up, the correlation related to reprimands. So a correlation is when two pieces of data are linked. So a whole different lesson. I'm just going to talk about this very quickly. When two pieces of data move together, they can move either inversely or in the same direction. And they can either be causal or correlated. So, in the case of, I use this example a lot. Worms come out, on a day when the worms are out on the sidewalk, it makes people bring their umbrellas out. So you can say worms and umbrellas are correlated. Well, it's pretty obvious what's happening. It's raining, right? So if it rains, it'll make the worms come out of the ground. It'll make people bring their umbrellas out. So umbrellas and worms are correlated, but you'd be really ridiculous to try to convince somebody and say, oh, there's worms out on the sidewalk. People are going to bring their umbrellas out now because of the worms, or vice versa. You say the worms see the umbrellas and come out of their holes. Those are both ridiculous statements. But if you say it's raining, you'll see more umbrellas, or it's raining, you'll see more worms. Those would make a lot of sense. So there's the cause that goes with it. And what happens here is we get the correlation backwards. We're definitely correlated that when people do poor performance, they get reprimands, but we're wrong on the causation. We think the poor performance is causing the reprimand. It's the other way around. Or let me try and phrase it. We think that the increase in performance after poor performance is due to reprimand, and it's not. It's due to the randomness. So we get it backwards. We don't. Yeah, I think you get what I'm trying to say. This lost my train of thought there and kind of went down this little rabbit hole. But the whole point is that it creates bad behavior, and we don't have it actually right. The reprimand is encouraged because randomness makes employee behavior employee performance get better when they're having a bad day. So the next day it'll be better. And now we've kind of learned behavior. This is a learned behavior in managers that if they bring out the bullhorn and yell at a person, they're going to get better the next day. And it's really not related. It's not a cause. I mean, it's related, but it's not the cause of people getting better. They're getting better because they know their job and the factors that drove them down. They got some rest that night or whatever happened. Very rarely does yelling at an employee make them perform better. It is the fact that they're doing something else that they probably were going to do anyway. If a person's tired, they're probably going to go get a good night's sleep. If they're sick and they have a sore knee, they're going to ice it because they want to get better and they're going to perform better. So I think I babbled a lot here. Hopefully you got the point though. When you think something works, even if it doesn't, you start increasing the behavior. So we start seeing more and more of this reprimands and less of the attaboys because bosses think that's what's going on. So anyway, like I said, take actions, understand the real reasons for the ups and downs from the average, come up with a plan to either lock in the positives or eliminate the negatives. And then anytime you want to do attaboys and reprimands, make sure they're focused on the long-term changes, not the short-term. So that's all I got for today. Have a good day.